Salut and welcome back. In this short video series, I pick several examples of popular French comedies that use language as a means of comedy, and I explain why French people find it funny. The first part was about the movie Les Visiteurs, and I've prepared a schedule of 5 videos that you can see right here. Of course, these choices are mine, and I can't possibly choose every French comedy, but we had to start somewhere. Also, if you're familiar with the show or a movie, I might not have picked your favorite part, but I had to pick one. And my pick was heavily influenced by the need to show the use of French grammar or vocabulary. After all, this is part of our French class videos. And also, nothing prevents us from making more if you enjoy these. So please, like this video and subscribe to this channel if you want the series to continue after the first 5. Anyhow, so today we're going to study a small extract from the TV show Kaamelott. Kaamelott was at first an ultra-short TV series, a format that started getting pretty popular in France around the end of the 90s and the early 2000s on the TV channel M6, with shows like Un gars, une fille with Jean Dujardin and Alexandra Lamy, and Caméra Café with Bruno Solo and Yvan Le Bolloc. Basically, it's a series of small bits that last 3 to 6 minutes in total, and it was aired right before the news. Eventually, Kaamelott got so popular that it pulled itself out of this ultra-short format and got first extended to 8 minutes to finally become a full 45-minute TV show. Finally, it eventually became a movie trilogy that is still in production today. But the extract we're about to see today is from the first book, which means the first season. So it's still in this short skit format, which to a lot of people is when Kaamelott was at its funniest. Kaamelott is a strange series. It uses the legend of King Arthur with his famous sword Excalibur and the Knight of the Round Table. Except it's a comedy. First, the language used is very strange because even though they express themselves like contemporary people in their accents and reactions, they still use some old words mixed with slang from different eras. And the text can also be very theatrical at times, almost musical. I'll be honest, and I'll have to admit that every now and then they use words I had to look up. Although, as a native Parisian, the context can sometimes be enough to know what they mean. But this strange mix of vocabulary is why you can hear a sentence full of cursing while also having a whole episode written in Alexandrine poetry. The character of King Arthur, Arthur, is played by the show creator, writer and music director Alexandre Astier. Arthur has been raised by the Romans and therefore is very educated. Opposite that, you have most of his knights who come from remote farms in the Brittany region of the time and never had any proper education. Some have some level of understanding, mainly his right-hand Lancelot, Lancelot, who, if you know the story of King Arthur, is secretly in love with his wife Guenièvre, which also brings a lot of jokes since the audience knows that fact, but the king doesn't. There is also the king's in-laws, Guenièvre's parents, who are only there to berate him and profit from their position in the castle. But going back to our knights who don't understand anything, the dynamic of the character of King Arthur is very strange because while he believes in finding the Grail to bring the light to all people, he also has to work with people who most of the time understand nothing about what they're supposed to do. From directions to instructions, there's not one episode where he doesn't have to pull his hair trying to get them to do the simplest thing. Arthur's relationship with his knights is very peculiar at times, because while you can see he's always about to lose his mind, he also seems to deeply feel for them and hang on to the hope they'll become great knights. In one episode, for example, one of the knights, Perceval, who is by far one of the dumbest of the lot while being the most loyal, has lunch with King Arthur and tells him that he's going to have to leave because it's obvious the king doesn't love him since he's always yelling at him. He proceeds to say that he understands, but that it's very difficult for him because he loves him very much. To which the king, who doesn't like to show any feelings, ends up having to prove him that he likes him by making him realize that he's the only knight with whom he ever has lunch. But while saying that, he tells him something along the line of, "Before lunch, I walk around and I think, oh, I'm going to invite Percival for lunch, that will make me happy. Of course, around halfway through the meal, I want to break your skull with my wine glass, but yeah, still, you're the only one I invite, so I guess that shows that I love you?" To me, this interaction describes perfectly his relationship with his knights. And I choose to mention this because it directly links to today's extract, which is going to involve Percival on one of his regular lunches with the king. I can't show the whole episode, of course, so I'm going to tell you the episode setup. Perceval starts at the tavern with his best friend, the knight Caradoc. He explains to him that he got hurt because the king's father-in-law basically refused to put him in charge of the borders and said that he would rather name an old scabious paralyzed woman. Caradoc then tells him « Je crois que vous êtes souvent la victime des colibets. Il y a trop de gens à Kaamelott qui oublient que vous êtes un vrai chevalier. Je crois que vous devriez aller voir le roi et lui dire qu'il faudrait qu'on commence à vous considérer en tant que tel. » This sentence means in English, I believe you are often the victim of jeers. There are too many people in Kaamelott who forget that you are a real knight. I think you should go to the king and tell him that you should start being considered as such. Now, the setup of the joke is about two things. First, the word colibet, which is a way of saying the word insult using a higher language. It translates to something like jeer or jibe. The point is that Perceval clearly didn't understand the word and is going to have trouble repeating this word to the king. The second part is that he tells him that he's a great knight, and instead of saying, "You should tell the king that people should consider you as a great knight," he avoids repeating the word, which is a thing French people love to do, and he says, "Tell him you should start being considered as such." Now, without the first sentence, this will obviously be gibberish. So let me show you how he delivers his request to the king. Just like before, try to focus on the subtitles.
Vous savez, sire, j'aimerais bien qu'on commence à me considérer en tant que tel.
Comment?
Comment?
Vous considérez en tant que... J'ai pas compris.
Me considérer en tant que tel.
En tant que tel quoi?
Okay, let's pause here for a second. You can probably tell here how the joke is developing after that first setup I mentioned. Perceval repeats what he heard without actually thinking about the words he's using. He thinks that what Caradoc told him made sense, and he repeats what he remembers. The problem is that he remembers the sentence without mentioning what it refers to. Caradoc told him not to forget that he's a great knight, part 1, and then he told him, "I think people should start considering you as such." Now, Perceval only repeats that last part. So imagine someone shows up in front of you and says, "I think I should be considered as such." Of course, your answer would be, Considered as what? Now, as you saw, the king is trying to understand, and he asks him what he means while already losing patience because he knows that this will probably take hours, where he's going to pull his hair while still not understanding what he meant in the end. Now, let's keep playing and see how Perceval explains himself.
Parce que je trouve que je suis souvent victime des colifichés quand même. C'est pas normal.
Victime des... Putain, la vache, je comprends pas un mot de ce que vous racontez. Allez-y, excusez-moi, reprenez depuis le début, je vous écoute.
Je vous disais que j'étais victime des colifichés et qu'il faudrait qu'on commence à me considérer en tant que tel.
Okay, as you saw, Perceval chooses to go to the other bit of his conversation with Caradoc instead of saying that he's a great knight. The problem is that he misheard the word colibet. The word colibet, as I said before, means jeer or jibe. Let's just say it's not an everyday word. So Perceval uses another word that sounds the same and that he must have heard before while obviously not knowing what it means either. So he says, Je crois que je suis victime des colifichets. Colifichet is a word that means something like a trinket. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense in this sentence. Remember that the king is already a bit irate because he doesn't understand what Perceval tells him, and now Perceval just told him as an explanation to why he should be considered as such, that he thinks that he's too often the victim of trinkets. Now, let's keep watching and see how the king tries to figure out what Perceval is trying to tell him and if he finally loses patience.
C'est pas clair, c'est ça?
Non, mais je sens bien que vous essayez de me dire quelque chose, mais c'est de vous la phrase ou vous l'avez entendu ça? Colifichet, par exemple, qu'est-ce que c'est pour vous? Comment vous le représentez, colifichet?
Comment dire, colifiché, c'est quelqu'un qui...
Non. Déjà non, je suis désolé, pas du tout.
Quelqu'un qui dit du mal d'une personne?
Non, mais non, c'est pas ça.
Comment on dit alors?
Okay, here you can see the king is obviously losing it. In his last hope, he tried to ask him what the word colifichet represented in his head to try to figure out what he's trying to say. Of course, his patience is pretty thin here, so when Perceval tells him it's a person, the king, who knows that colifichet is a trinket and that his sentence involved being a victim of something, not someone, he says, no, it's not a person. Then Perceval says, yes it is, someone who says bad things about someone. Now you can figure out how Perceval sees his sentence in his mind. He believes that he's the victim of people who say bad things about him, aka jeers or jibes. However, in his sentence, it makes no sense. So, in a final attempt, he asks the king, how do we say it then? Except, the king still has zero idea about what he's trying to say, so he's about to actually lose it. Let's keep playing.
Comment on dit quoi? Putain, non, ça y est, j'en ai marre là.
Une personne qui dit du mal d'une personne qui commence par colis.
Non, moi je crois qu'il faut que vous arrêtiez d'essayer de dire des trucs. Ça vous fatigue déjà, puis pour les autres, vous vous rendez pas compte de ce que c'est. Moi, quand vous faites ça, ça me fout une angoisse. Je pourrais vous tuer, je crois. De chagrin, hein. Je vous jure, c'est pas bien. Il faut plus que vous parliez avec des gens.
Alright, we're going to stop the extract here. Even though there's still a little bit to this skit, I can give you the ending. The king eventually tells him that he'll try to do something about it, even though he never understood what he meant. But what I want to focus on is that last interaction. This final sentence by the king is actually my favorite sentence in the whole series. He says something along the line of, I could kill you, just out of grief. It's not my favorite sentence because of its meaning. It's because of how poetic and relevant to the character it is. As I said, the king and Perceval actually have a very close relationship. But more like the king is a father and Perceval is a child, a very, very little child who makes a lot of mistakes and doesn't know how to express himself. But let's go back to the entire king's tirade here. He says after Perceval asked him, how do you say someone who says something bad about someone that starts with coli? And I'm going to translate this, trying to keep some of the poetic in it. No, I really think you should stop trying to say things. First, it wears you out, and I don't think you realize the effect it has on others. Me, when you do this, it's giving me such anxiety, I could kill you. From grief. I swear, this isn't right. You need to stop talking to people. This interaction to me sums up most of the show's dynamic. Arthur has a great destiny to accomplish, and he believes that anyone can be a great knight. So he always tries to explain things, even though anyone would probably just prefer to surround themselves with the most educated people. But while he does that, he slowly loses patience, and without spoiling the whole story, his willpower will slim down slowly over time. Alright, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments if you thought this was a funny interaction and if you think that a show like Kaamelott would work in English. Next week, we will talk about the movie La Haine. Now, La Haine is not a funny movie at all, but it is one of the most relevant movies of the 90s about Parisian suburbs and the problem of police violence, while also being the perfect snapshot of 90s oral slang, le verlan. Because it includes a lot of crude language, let's just say it this way, we will only study a very short extract while going over what was the verlan slang and what remains from it in today's slang. In the meantime, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you on the next one. Au revoir.